Today, we are diving deep into the history of one of the most significant and, let's be honest, one of the most contested pieces of land on the entire planet. This is a story that stretches back from millennia, a real epic of faith, empires, and the simple, powerful will to survive. So you have to ask, how did this happen? How did this one tiny sliver of land, sandwiched between continents, become the absolute center of the world for three major religions and a flashpoint for centuries of conflict? Well, that's the big question we're going to try and unpack. Okay, so let's rewind. Way back. Our story doesn't start with the famous kings you've heard about. It starts even earlier, in the land of Canaan, which was this area of vibrant city-states that really set the stage for everything that came after, including the rise of the first Israelite kingdoms. Now, this timeline shows a huge transformation. For centuries, during the Bronze Age, Canaan was this patchwork of city-states, kind of paying tribute to Egypt. But then, look what happens around 1200 BCE. The old world is collapsing, and something new pops up in the highlands. Hundreds of small villages. This is the beginning of the early Israelites. By 1000 BCE, according to tradition, they've united under kings like Saul, David, and Solomon. But that unity, it doesn't last. Around 930 BCE, the kingdom splits in two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And that division, well, it made them vulnerable. One by one, the great empires of the day, first the Assyrians and then the Babylonians, came and conquered them. And this is where things get really cool, because this isn't just from a holy book. This quote is carved in stone. It's from a victory monument for an Egyptian pharaoh, and it's the earliest known reference to a people called Israel outside of the Bible. What it tells us is that, even way back then, a group known as Israel was important enough for the regional superpower to brag about defeating them. It's a crucial piece of physical evidence that anchors this ancient story in real, verifiable history. Now, you really can't understand this period without understanding the First Temple. Built by King Solomon, this wasn't just a big, fancy building. It was the absolute heart of the Kingdom of Judah, spiritually, politically, everything. It centralized their entire religious life, which used to be spread out all over the place. For centuries, this building was the anchor of their identity. And so, you can imagine, its destruction wasn't just a military defeat. It was an unimaginable catastrophe. So with the Israelite kingdoms gone, the land enters a whole new era. For centuries, it's defined by one thing: foreign rule. A whole parade of the ancient world's most powerful empires, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and finally, the Romans, all take their turn ruling this territory. And each one of them left a massive mark on the Jewish people. And what you see during this time is this incredible cycle of total destruction, followed by this resilient rebirth. It starts in 586 BCE. The Babylonians don't just conquer Judah, they obliterate the First Temple and drag the leadership off to Babylon. It's a national trauma. But then there's a glimmer of hope. The Persian king, Cyrus the Great, comes along, and he actually lets them go back and rebuild. And they do. The Second Temple is finished in 516 BCE, and it becomes the center of Jewish life for almost 600 years until the cycle repeats itself, this time with the Romans, who destroy it for good. The conflict with Rome was an absolute cataclysm. I mean, it wasn't just one war. It was a series of furious rebellions against the most powerful empire in the world. And the results were just catastrophic. The destruction of the temple was only the start. Huge numbers of people were killed or sold into slavery across the empire. And then, as a final blow, the Romans banned Jews from Jerusalem entirely and even renamed the whole province from Judea to Syria-Palestina. This effectively crushed any hope of Jewish independence for over 1,800 years and sent the population scattering across the globe. But, out of that total devastation came one of the most remarkable religious reinventions in history. Think about it. Your central place of worship, the core of your faith, is gone forever. How do you survive that? Well, the answer was Rabbinic Judaism. The focus shifted. Instead of sacrifices at one temple, it became about prayer and local synagogues and deep, intense study of the Torah. Judaism became a faith you could carry with you, anchored not by a place, but by a shared text and shared traditions. And honestly, that evolution is the key to how it survived all those centuries in exile. All right, we're going to fast forward a lot. For the next 1,700 years, the land is ruled by Byzantines, Arabs, Ottomans, a long list. But now we're jumping to the 19th century. In Europe, there's this powerful new idea sweeping the continent: nationalism. And out of that idea, a modern political movement is born that aims to turn that ancient dream of return into a reality. So what exactly is Zionism? Well, at its heart, it's a nationalist movement. It was born in the same European intellectual soup that had the Greeks, the Poles, and the Italians all demanding their own countries. And the idea was pretty simple. Jewish people are a nation, and like other nations, they deserve their own state where they can determine their own destiny. And for almost everyone involved, there was only one place that state could be, the ancestral homeland, Zion.
Now, this movement didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was a direct response to a terrifying reality. The hope that Jews could just blend into European society was being violently shattered. In Russia, you had these horrific massacres called pogroms. And even in supposedly enlightened France, you had the Dreyfus Affair, where a Jewish army officer was framed for treason, exposing this deep, ugly vein of anti-Semitism. So for many, the solution became radical. If we can't be safe as minorities in other people's countries, we need to be a majority in our own.
And this is the voice of the movement's main organizer, Theodor Herzl. After he pulled together the first Zionist Congress, he wrote these words in his diary, and they are just unbelievably prophetic. He took what had been a religious hope and a bunch of scattered ideas and turned it into a real, organized political project. And as it turned out, his 50-year prediction was almost exactly right. So, the early 20th century arrives, and everything changes. World War I completely shatters the old world order. The Ottoman Empire, which had ruled this land for 400 years, just collapses. And into that power vacuum steps Great Britain, which kicks off a whole new and very fateful chapter in the story. This document right here, it's just 67 words long, but it is one of the most consequential texts of the 20th century. In the middle of World War I, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration. For the Zionist movement, this was a massive win, the official backing of a global empire. But it had a fatal flaw, a huge contradiction. It supported a Jewish national home while also saying nothing should be done to harm the rights of the existing non-Jewish communities. The problem? Those communities made up about 90% of the population at the time. So for the next 30 years, British rule was defined by trying to manage these two conflicting promises. Jewish immigration shot up, especially as the Nazis came to power in Germany. The Jewish community was busy building the foundations of a state, new towns, farms, political groups, and all of this, naturally, fueled Arab fears that they were going to be displaced. Tensions boiled over into violence and eventually into a major Arab revolt in 1936. So what did the British do? Right as World War II was about to explode, they slammed the doors shut, issuing the 1939 White Paper, which severely restricted Jewish immigration, a decision that had horrific consequences for European Jews. After World War II, a battered and broke Britain basically said, "We're done," and handed the whole hot potato over to the new United Nations. The UN's solution? Partition. Divide the land into a Jewish state and an Arab state, and put Jerusalem under international control. The response could not have been more different. The Jewish leadership accepted it. It wasn't perfect, but it was a state. The Arab leadership, however, rejected it completely. They saw it as foreign powers carving up their land without their consent. And that fundamental disagreement, it meant war was coming. And now we arrive at that pivotal year, 1948. The British are leaving, a Jewish state is born, and all those simmering tensions just erupt into a full-scale war. This is the birth of modern Israel, yes, but it's also the moment the modern conflict becomes deeply, deeply entrenched. So, on May 14th, 1948, as the last British soldiers were sailing away, David Ben-Gurion stood up in Tel Aviv and declared the establishment of the State of Israel. After almost 2,000 years of exile, a sovereign Jewish state was a reality again. For Jewish people everywhere, it was this moment of incredible triumph, especially coming right after the absolute horror of the Holocaust. But that celebration lasted less than 24 hours. The very next day, the armies of 5 Arab nations invaded. The brand new, poorly armed state of Israel had to fight for its life. The outcome was complex. Israel survived and even expanded its territory. But the war also created 2 enormous and tragic refugee crises. More than 700,000 Palestinian Arabs either fled or were expelled from their homes, an event they called the Nakba, or the catastrophe. At the same time, a wave of violent persecution swept the Arab world, forcing over 800,000 Jews to flee their ancient homes, with most of them ending up in the new state of Israel. And the 1948 war wasn't the end. It was really just the beginning of a whole new chapter of conflict. The decades that followed were filled with major wars. The most transformative one was the Six-Day War in 1967. In a shocking victory, Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza, the Sinai, and the Golan Heights. And just like that, it was ruling over millions of Palestinians. That new reality of occupation eventually led to the Intifadas, the Palestinian uprisings, which changed the conflict from state-on-state war to this incredibly complex struggle. But the story isn't just one of relentless war. There have been these critical moments where diplomacy actually broke through. The Camp David Accords in 78 led to a historic peace treaty with Egypt, a huge deal. The Oslo Accords in the 90s led to Israel and the PLO officially recognizing each other. And just recently, the Abraham Accords normalized relations with several Gulf states. So these moments show that peace, while incredibly difficult, isn't impossible. And yet, despite those breakthroughs, the big, thorny core issues of the conflict are still there, totally unresolved. What's the final status of Jerusalem, a city holy to both sides? What about the Israeli settlements? How do you solve the question of Palestinian refugees? These are the fundamental issues, the really tangled knots that have tripped up every single attempt at a lasting peace. And that brings us right up to today. After thousands of years of empires, kingdoms, exile, and return, the history of this small piece of land is still being written every single day. It's a story of deep faith, competing histories, and trauma that hasn't healed. Its future is completely unwritten, leaving all of us with the hardest question of all. What will its next chapter hold?